Shalom, and welcome to part 2 of our first Torah portion at Scroll to Scroll, Bereshit. Now we closed part 1 with an extensive commentary on some of the very deep mysteries of Genesis chapters 1 through 6. And a lot of that material is reflected, as I said, in the Genesis Decoded teaching, which I have enhanced into a video of the PowerPoint with my voice over it. Now we're going to get into the linguistics. And I believe this will still be a total of 3 videos for the Scroll program. Although I got so much stuff to go through, I can't eliminate the possibility of there being another one. But we will get through it, and I think the journey is well worth it, even if it's quite a bit longer. I've always looked at Bereshit as a double portion, even though it is technically classified as a single one, because there's so much going on. 6 chapters is a lot. Now, starting with Genesis 1:1 with the word Bereshit in the beginning, as I alluded to in part 1, the Onkelos Targum that says in the beginnings or in the eternities with the phrase Kadmin. Kadmin is ancient times, and it's in the plural, indicating there was more than one creation event happening. Within the word Bereshit is also, I believe, the first messianic prophecy, but you need Hebrew and Aramaic to retrieve it. Bar, the first part of the word, is the Aramaic word for sun. We also see in Bereshit the word bara, created. The word resh, which is head or chief or beginning, where you get Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And the remaining part, shet, is the number 6 in Aramaic, whereas in Hebrew it's shesh. Now, to my mind, this spells out a message. The sun, basically, the sun of creation is the head of the 6 days. In other words, the sun is created before the 6 days of creation because he is the Word. And through the Word, all things were made. Through him, by him, and through his hands. That's why John says, through him everything was made. Through the Word, everything was made. Without him, nothing that has been made has been made. That's exactly what Bereshit is pointing to. The Jonathan Targum, or Pseudo-Jonathan Targum, on Genesis 1 verse 2 says, and the spirit of mercies from before Yahweh breathed upon the face of the waters. I think that's beautiful. Right? Then we get to Genesis 1:5. Vayemer Elohim Yehirakia, and Elohim said, let there be a sky. This sky, rakia, is usually translated as firmament, but it literally means expanse, indicating a separation between Shemayim, the heavens, and the waters. It is a different kind of sky from Shemayim, or the universe. In other places, rakia can also denote, I believe, matter. The Jonathan Targum on Genesis 1:14 reads that for the sun and the moon, I'll read the original text, which is, yes, I just decided to do that spontaneously. Okay, here we are. Elohim said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and they shall serve as signs, seasons, days, and years. Right? Right? The way that reads in the Jonathan Targum, and for making sacred the beginnings of the months and the years, the passing away of the months and the years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the cyclings of the seasons. Oh, I love that precision. That is beautiful. And then we read in 1 verse 16, Vayas Elohim, and made Elohim. The tense indicates that these luminaries were made on a 4th day. All right? Meaning that neither the sun nor the moon can be used to count days for a 7-day Shabbat. In other words, we don't count to the 11th day because the sun and moon weren't around in the other days. Now, in the Genesis Decoded chronology, I make the point that day 4 is actually the 2nd day. Chronologically speaking, it still works. We do not use the sun and moon to count the full week, okay, of creation. And therefore, we do not use the sun and moon to count our weeks since creation. And Abba Yahweh says, that this is a memorial of creation week. So we are to count the same exact way. The Shabbat count, 1 to 7, back to 1 again, is in fact independent of the sun, moon, stars, galaxies, cosmic strings, whatever you want to call it, right? As I said, for more information on why day 4 is actually day 2, consult the Genesis Decoded video. Then the Jonathan Targum on Genesis 1:18 says, afterwards the moon recited a triple report, or a false report, in other words, that there were 3 versions that made it a lie, against the sun, and she, the moon, was demoted, and the sun was given the rank of the greater light to rule the day, and the moon to be the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. Now, obviously, there's a bit of a legend going on here, but it is to reinforce a legitimate Torah point. The moon is subservient to the sun. The moon takes orders from the sun. Okay? So I think that is an important distinction to make. Right? So we continue reading the Jonathan Targum here. And the moon to be the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And Yahweh ordained them to their tasks in the greatest reaches of the heavens, to produce light upon the earth, to minister by day and by night, to discern properly between the light of the day and the darkness by night. And Abba Yahweh saw that it was good. And this brings us to Genesis 1, verse 21. Vayivra Elohim etcha Tanaim hagedolim. And Elohim created the great Tanaim. The word Tanaim can alternatively be translated as dragons, sea monsters, or maybe whales, according to some authorities. Others think that these are the Leviathan, those creatures and their mates. I don't know if we'll ever know which is which for sure, but it's worth looking at. Varemes v'chayeto, creeping things, or perhaps land animals. What do you creep on? Land, right? You don't necessarily creep in the water, although I suppose you could. Vayemer Elohim ha'adam betzalmanu. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image. Recalling the fact that multiple creations happened and that within Bereshit is proof that the Son/Word was the first thing that Abba Yahweh created, we need to further confirm this through Psalm 33:6. By the word of Elohim were the word of Yahweh the heavens were made, and by his breath their starry host. And Yochanan 1:1-5. Abba Yahweh sent the word out of his mouth. The word created the heavens and the earth by him, for him, and through his hands. That's how the Aramaic reads, as we just went over. And so it was Yeshua who made these things as the word. The us and our are Abba Yahweh talking to his son. Right? Jerusalem Targum reads, and the Memra, the word of Yahweh, created man in his likeness. In the resemblance of the presence of Yahweh, he created them, both the man and his helper. The Jonathan Targum on Genesis reads, in the image of Yahweh created him with the 248 bones and with 365 nerves. 248 bones, 365, one for every day of the year, right? And draped them over them skin and filled them with flesh and blood, right? And this is obviously a riff on the Talmudic commentary that there are 613 commandments, 248 positive, 365 negative, right? And again, it also relates to the original solar calendar. Yes, you knew I was getting that in there. Okay, 1 verse 28. U et ha'eretz v'chivesh shucha. Fill up the earth and conquer it. In order to do this command, man must endeavor to understand the inner workings of the planet, which he can only do through disciplined observation of the planet. The method of this observation is given in 1 Thessalonians 5:21-22. Test everything, hold on to the good, and avoid all evil. Kosher science, in other words. Shabbat 2 verse 3, rested, but not because Abba Yahweh was tired, because he never gets tired. Rather, Abba Yahweh completed his work and therefore saw that it was complete and stopped doing it. This is confirmed in 2 verse 4 with asa, made, past tense, had been made, completed, denoting completion. Later Jewish sources, though, will speculate that certain events like the building of the temple in their way, were the last act of creation. In the Onkelos Targum, it will say, Bene Shemisheta, a metaphor meaning from evening to evening, between the suns. See Exodus 3, verse 6. Also a confirmation of the day beginning at sunset. In 2 verse 4, Asot, made. However, the word connotes a stronger sense of completeness than bara and other similar words in Hebrew. Onkelos, for 2 verse 4, says, uses the word for generations that can, as Etheridge points out, also mean these are the recitals or the oral histories of Adam, thus showing some of the sources behind the written Torah. However, Toledot is the record of generations. I don't care whether they consider it oral or not. It's the record of the generations. 2 verse 5, the Adam ayin la'avod ha'adamah, and there was no man to work the ground. However, there seems a wordplay or hint, the use of Adam for man as opposed to ish, right? Indicating there was no Adam to work the ground, thus harmonizing, well, this just harmonizing with Genesis decoded. However, I'm going to make a note that I need to make a slight change on that note there. Okay. And I will do just that. Okay. Adamah, Adam, both the words for Adam and man and Adamah, ground, are also cognates directly to the word Adom, which can mean red or blood. There is a linkage between the descendants of Adam and the Adamah, their ground, as opposed to Eretz. Nefesh Chaya, Adam becomes a living soul. He doesn't have a soul. We talked about that. Eden literally means delight or pleasant. We also talked about that. Right? And then you get the river Pishon and the place of Havilah, where there is gold, 2 verse 11. Some commentators think the Pishon is the Nile, but Josephus and others believe it is the Ganges or Indus River. Between Kashmir and Pakistan, the upper Indus River, there is a very ancient town that has been known as Havilah for more than 5,000 years. There's also another Havilah, which may be in another location, but that's another story. The Gihon River, though, is more likely to be the Nile, according to Josephus and others. The courses of these rivers must have shifted, either due to tributaries drying up and reestablishing themselves, and we might be able to track that progression through satellites, or because of the flood. It is also possible that there are 2 places named Havilah. The other one is called east of Egypt, whereas this one, east of Egypt, which as India is. And you can read about that in Genesis 25, verse 18. But the other more familiar one might be, as Cush is south of Egypt. We're still looking into this, trying to sort these details out. I'm putting this page aside so I remember to make a change. Okay. Jonathan Targum for 2:15 says that when Yahweh creates Eden, he took the man from the mountain of worship where he had been created and made him to dwell in the Garden of Eden, to do service in the Torah, and to keep the commandments. This idea again comes from covenant, Berit, that is from the beginning, or in the beginning, Bereshit. One is within the other. Ezer Kenegdo, 2 verse 20, the helper who stands in front. The woman is meant to complement the man and stand in front of him, not behind, not below, but not above. Right? So she is not an abject slave. She has supervision in her areas as the man has supervision in his areas. They are equal in importance, but their responsibilities are not identical. Etzem me'atzameh uvesar mi basari. The bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. This is both literal, Eve came out of Adam's rib, and figurative, to express how deeply intimate he felt connected to his wife. You might look at it as the first love poem. Getting into Genesis 3, the serpent, Nachash. However, Nachash also means divination. And that may indicate, as it does to me and to many Jewish authorities, that divination comes from the serpent, or Hasatan. Right? 3 verse 5, Ki Yodea Elohim, like Elohim knowing. The word Elohim can refer to Yahweh, or in some cases to mighty ones like angels. But when it is intended to refer to angels and so on, there would be plural verbs. when it refers to Elohim, there are singular verbs. The verbs must match in gender and number, right? That's to avoid craziness. But in this case, it is possible the serpent was saying they could be like the angels. Ironically, of course, some of these same angels would become envious of them and become demons. 3 verse 8, Vayishmeu et kol Yahweh mithalech bagan. And they heard the sound of Yahweh, the voice of Yahweh moving through the garden. The issue has to do with whether Adam and Eve heard the kol, the voice of Yahweh moving through the garden, or whether they heard the sound, also kol, of Abba Yahweh moving, as if physically through the garden. This comes down to the issue of what we call anthropomorphism of Yahweh, or ascribing to him physical attributes. If Abba Yahweh had some form of physicality or presence, then they heard that moving through the garden as if they expect to see him. But if it's just his voice, there's nothing attached to it. Or it's his son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Jonathan says, then Eve got a warning before she sinned. And get a load of this. Jonathan Targum says, and the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and was afraid. Yet she knew the tree was good to eat, and that it was medicine for the enlightenment of the eyes, and a desirable tree by which to understand. This is simply a little midrash because Abba Yahweh literally sent a message of death, and a message of death implies a messenger of death, Samael, the angel of death. The Targum has simply personified the message and gave him a name. The Jerusalem Targum, though, adds this information regarding this same curse. That's very interesting. And it shall be that when the sons of the woman keep the commandments of the Torah, they will be prepared to strike upon your head, meaning the serpent, of course. But when they forsake the commandments of the Torah, you will be ready to wound them in the heel. Nevertheless, for them there shall be a medicine, but for you there shall not be a medicine. Oh, I love this next line. Get ready for this. And they shall make a remedy for the poison in the heel in the days of King Mashiach. I told you Genesis 3:15 was linked to Yeshua. The Targumist agrees. For from the dust it is that you are to rise and render judgment and reckoning for all that you have done in the day of the great judgment. Testify, Jerusalem Targum. Hava and Adam, 3:20 and elsewhere. Hava means living, Adam means man or blood or earth. Together they are the living blood of man on earth. What do you think? Kind of cool. Or Adam and Eve could be living man. Kotnot or vayalabishem, leather garments, and he clothed them. Or as some others translate, shrouds of skin, perhaps referring to the male foreskin and the female hymen. I'm sorry to be that graphic. Onkelos then reads in 3 verse 22, and Yahweh Elohim said, behold, the man has become alone in the world by himself, or singular. Jonathan says, and Yahweh Elohim said to the angels who ministered before him, behold, Adam is utterly unique on earth, even as I am utterly unique in the heavens above. And it will be that they will arise from him who will know to discern between good and evil. Kind of makes Adam like a little Elohim, doesn't it? Jonathan then continues, had he, Adam, kept the commandments which I appointed to him, he would have lived and subsisted as the tree of life forever. But now, because he did not keep what I had prescribed, I gave you one command, Adam, and you couldn't do it. It is decreed against him that we keep him from the Garden of Eden. Jerusalem Targum adds, for the Torah is the tree of life, and whoever keeps it in this life lives and sustains himself as the tree of life. That's sort of riffing off Proverbs chapter 3. The Torah is good to keep in this world as the fruit of the tree of life in the world that is to come. Olam haba. Then the cherubim in 3 verse 24, cherubim or angels, Bible.ort.org has this commentary. Rashi notes that they are angels of destruction. Man is told that he must eventually die and be banished from paradise. He can only return to paradise after death, and before doing so, he must pass by these angels of purgatory, Bachya. Obviously, a little Catholic influence happening in the Middle Ages with these Jews, right? Let's remember that Rashi himself is Rashi himself lives in medieval France. where there are a couple of Catholics, as I've heard. Okay? The prophet must also pass through these angels to approach the tree of life and obtain a vision. This is the significance of the cherubim of the ark, Exodus 25:18, and those seen in Ezekiel's vision, Ezekiel 1:5, 10, 15, according to Maimonides, Rambam on Exodus 25:18. That's a very interesting quote here. Now we get to Genesis 4 linguistics. You can see why I broke this up. Look, we're already at 21 minutes practically, and I'm just doing the linguistics. V'taled et Chayin, v'vaytomer chaniti ish et Yahweh. And Eve brought forth Cain, saying, I have gained chaniti, a man from Yahweh. Cain means possession, or to gain, or to get. All right? And as such, there is no hint of morality, of righteousness inherent in the meaning of his name. Vayehi meketz yamim, literally, and the days ended, or and it was the end of days. More idiomatically and easier, it means, and an era or an epoch came to an end, or the age ended. And this is because Cain was the first human being to be born without direct intervention from Abba Yahweh to make him. Well, yeah. And in other words, Abba Yahweh formed Adam from the dust, and he formed Eve out of Adam's rib. Now, that is, going under the traditional idea, which I disagree with, that the people in Genesis 1 are the same as Adam and Eve. Obviously, the people in Genesis 1 were formed direct intervention, and the people that followed them in multiple generations for the children of Elohim were through normal reproductive means. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And from the, but staying on this point about Genesis 2 people, Abba Yahweh formed Adam from the dust. He formed Eve out of Adam's rib, but Cain came about through that same reproduction. So for this lineage. But this does not impact on our previous discussion of pre-Adamic races possibly being around, and that's a separate topic. Jonathan in Jerusalem explained the phrase, sin crouches at your door, this way. If you do not do your work in this world, well, your sin is held over until the great day of judgment. This is Yahweh talking to Cain, apparently, according to the Targumist. And at the doors of your heart lay your sin, and into your hand I have delivered the power to overcome the evil passion. And to you will be the desire, so that you will have authority over it, to become righteous and to not sin. Cain in the Jerusalem Targum is a bit more respectful. And he says, nevertheless, there is a power before you, O Yahweh, to absolve and forgive me. Then in Onkelos, which is normally extremely literal, following the Hebrew text, gives more insight on the mark of Cain. And Yahweh appointed a sign for Cain sealed upon Cain's face. The text, Genesis doesn't say face, but that's what it says. Sealed on Cain's face, the mark of the great name and honorable. So Yahweh's own name is on Cain's face, or maybe forehead. Unless anyone finding him should strike him down. The Greek translation is Septuagint, and Targum Jonathan record Cain's utterance to his brother, let us go out in the field. We talked about that. Jonathan Targum really expands this discussion excessively. So Cain just doesn't say, come, let us go out into the field. Cain basically gives a PowerPoint lecture with lots of graphics and, big, thick handouts, and he goes on forever. And, I think that he basically bores Abel to death with that speech, as is recorded in the Jonathan Targum. So I doubt the historicity of that very long speech. Then in 4 verse 12 we read, Vanad tiche va'eretz, and separated you will be on the earth. Not separate may be related to nidah, separation, the rules for menstruating women. And also our sin separates us from Abba Yahweh. Then in 4 verse 21, Va'achot Tuval Cain, Naamah, and the sister of Tuval Cain was Naamah. Some sources say this lady would become Noah's wife, perhaps due to the similar sound and meaning of their names, they both mean comfort. You could argue that Naamah is a female version of Noach. It's not direct, though, but it's close. Note for 4 verse 23, some traditions state that Lamech had already killed Cain and Tuval Cain in spite of the mark and warning on Cain. If so, this would mean the first person to have more than one wife is the first person to have killed more than one person. It's not 100% certain this is the case. You know, when I call Lamech the first serial killer, sometimes folks go, Andrew, that might be taking it a little far. Maybe it is. But I still don't think Lamech is exactly the poster child of good behavior with those two wives of his. So I'm still not gonna wear you know, be a card-carrying member of the Lamech fan club. At least not this Lamech. Noah's dad, I might be willing to. Lamech did admit to killing two people of some sort, but the question is, was it justifiable homicide? Maybe we will never know. Others think Cain died much later with the city walls falling over top of him, as the current rabbinic legend. That comes rather late, though. It's a medieval legend. And finally, when verse 26 says, at that time men began to call on the name of Yahweh, which is what it actually says, they were calling on the name of Yahweh. The name of the Father Deluxe teaching shows that even the pagans knew this name in around 2000 BC, 1800 BC, somewhere in there. Cuneiform tablets recorded the name of Yahweh. Onkelos, though, because they're under the ban, says, in his days men ceased from praying in the name of Yahweh. Okay, well, that doesn't quite solve the problem, Onkelos, because now you're implying that before that they were saying the name of Yahweh. But it's obviously an attempt to support the rabbinic ban. The Septuagint also supports the rabbinic ban in various places. Now this brings us to Genesis 5. In 5 verse 5, Jerusalem's Targum says, for before Eve had given birth to Cain, who was not like Seth, and Abel was killed by Cain's hand, and Cain was cast out, neither is his seed recorded in the book of the lineage of Adam. But afterwards was born one like Abel, and he called his name Seth. When it comes to more info on Enoch, though, 5 verse 26, the Samaritan version says an angel took him rather than Yahweh took him directly. Jonathan, though, gets a little bit into the mystical traditions and says about Enoch. Enoch worshipped or served in truth before Yahweh, and after he had fathered Methuselah 300 years and fathered other sons and daughters, and Enoch served in truth before Yahweh. And behold, he was not with the sojourners of the earth, for he was withdrawn, and he ascended into the firmament of the world before Yahweh. And his name was called Metatron, the great seraph. So this is not just in, first Enoch, second Enoch, the book of Jubilees and all this. There is Enochian stuff in the Samaritan Pentateuch and to some extent in the other Targums. And those other testimonies, Onkelos says about Enoch, and Enoch pleased Yahweh, because to do Yahweh's will is literally the way to walk, halak. That's my commentary. So Onkelos says Enoch pleased Yahweh. Jerusalem says, for he was withdrawn by the word from before Yahweh. Again, the word took him, not Abba Yahweh directly. And in the Peshitta Tanakh, the Aramaic full translation of the entire Tanakh, we read, for Yahweh had not made Enoch to die. All interesting variations, I think, which is why I like reviewing this Targum literature from time to time. It opens up a window as to how Jews were thinking about Genesis 2,000 years ago. Genesis 6 notes, the only divergence, I write, in the rest of the Parsha is with some copies of Onkelos 6 verse 7 through 8, which says, and he said, I have created them to be good, that they might be perfect upon the earth, but they have not been perfect in their outspreading. And Yahweh said, I will blot them out. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. We're almost done. 6 verse 2, going back to the Hebrew text, says, Vayiru b'nei ha-Elohim, and saw the sons of Elohim. It is possible that Elohim is referring to earthly powers or mighty ones, and some do translate as sons or rulers. Others, like Joe and Phil, and I can't go with you, my friends Joe and Phil, I'm sorry. They're not angels, but I understand why you think so. The Nephilim, the fallen ones, leading son to propose, they are sons of fallen angels, but fallen can refer to their immoral state, right? And of humanity at this time. And this is actually given because in 120 years, Abba Yahweh plans to destroy all mankind in the flood, not because of any age limitations on the men, that man is not limited to 120 years from Genesis 6:3. But because we see that Abraham lived 175 years, Isaac 180, Jacob 147, and even Aaron, he eked it out, 123 years. And then in 6 verse 6, Vayinacham, and Yahweh regretted. Some translations say repented. But this implies that Abba Yahweh did wrong by making man. Instead, Abba Yahweh had regret that man had become so wicked, that man did not choose properly what to do. And finally, our Torah question of the week. The Nephilim are also called men of renown. Why are they famous? What did they do? Okay, I'll give you that answer as we get into part 3 of Bereshit. Take care. Talk to you soon.